My family mocked my failing art career for years, treating me like a charity case. At Thanksgiving, Uncle Gary laughed, tossing me a container for scraps. Then my sister's new boyfriend arrived, saw me, and terrifiedly whispered, "That's my CEO." This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of my 2014 Honda Civic, a sound that, for the last 5 years, had triggered an automatic tightening in my chest. It wasn't that the car was unreliable. It was actually a beast of an engine that had never let me down, but rather what the car represented to the people waiting inside the sprawling suburban house looming ahead. To me, the car was a smart, depreciated asset that allowed me to pour capital back into my business during the lean years. To my family, it was a rolling billboard declaring my failure. I turned off the ignition and sat in the silence for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The late November air was crisp, and I could see the condensation of my breath fogging up the windshield. I needed a moment, just 60 seconds to armor myself. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No designer sunglasses, no flashy jewelry, just a simple beige sweater and jeans. I looked exactly like what they expected. Elena, the struggling dreamer. Elena, the caution tale. "You can do this," I whispered to the empty car. "It's just 4 hours. Eat the turkey, smile at the insults, and go home to your life." My life, if they only knew, but telling them was a risk I hadn't been willing to take. Not yet. Not when the business was fragile, and certainly not now that it was booming. I knew them too well. I knew that the moment struggling Elena became wealthy Elena, the dynamic wouldn't shift to respect, it would shift to entitlement. I stepped out of the car, the cold biting at my cheeks. As I walked up the driveway, I could already hear the dull roar of laughter from inside. It was a sound that used to make me feel warm and safe as a child, but now it felt like a closed circle I was permanently on the outside of. I rang the doorbell. It wasn't my parents' house. They had retired to Florida 2 years ago and were skipping the cold weather this year. This was Uncle Gary's domain. Gary, my father's older, louder, and infinitely more judgmental brother. The door swung open, revealing my cousin, my sister in spirit, if not by blood, Sarah. She was glowing, dressed in a sleek black dress that probably cost more than my first 2 cars combined. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. She looked like success. She looked like what the family wanted me to be. "Elena," she exclaimed, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the smile one gives to a stray dog that has wandered onto the porch. Pity mixed with a slight annoyance that it was there at all. "You made it. We were worried your car might not handle the interstate." I forced a smile, stepping across the threshold. "Hi, Sarah, she runs fine. Good to see you." "MMHMM," she hummed, already turning away to lead me into the foyer. "Well, come in. Uncle Gary is making his famous martinis, and Liam, oh my God, Alina, you have to meet Liam, he's on his way. He got held up at work. Big corporate emergency. You know how it is." She paused, looking back at me with a tilted head. "Well, actually, I guess you don't. How is what do you call it? The consulting?" The air quotes were invisible, but I felt them land like slaps. "It's going well, Sarah. Busy," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Busy is good," she chirped, her tone dripping with condescension. "Keeps the lights on, right? Mostly." We walked into the living room, and the conversation stopped. It was immediate. Uncle Gary was holding court by the fireplace, a martini glass in one hand, his other hand gesturing wildly as he recounted some story about his team at the regional sales office. He froze mid-sentence when he saw me. His eyes scanned me from head to toe. He took in the boots that had seen better days, the lack of a luxury handbag, the simple sweater. A smirk, slow and oily, spread across his face. "Well, well," Gary boomed, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "The prodigal niece returns, and looking thrifty as always." A ripple of polite, uncomfortable laughter went through the room. My aunt, Gary's wife, sat on the sofa, clutching her wine glass. She gave me a sympathetic, tight-lipped nod, but she didn't speak up. She never did. "Hi, Uncle Gary," I said, maintaining my composure. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Happy Thanksgiving, kid," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "I hope you brought an appetite. We made extra. We know how tough the grocery bills are these days for the self-employed." Emphasis on self-employed made it sound like a disease. I felt the heat rise in my neck, a mix of humiliation and a burning, secret anger. The betrayal wasn't that they didn't know the truth. It was that they enjoyed the version of the truth they had invented. They loved poor Alina. It made them feel superior. It made their own mediocre achievements feel monumental. "I'm doing fine, Gary," I said quietly. "Sure, sure," he winked at the room. "That's what they all say until the rent is due. But hey, family is family. Grab a drink. Bottom shelf is in the kitchen." The laughter was louder this time. I walked toward the kitchen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was going to be a long night. But as I passed the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of my own eyes. They weren't watery. They were hard. The betrayal of their mockery was painful, yes, but it was worse than the insults. It was the absolute dismissal of my worth as a human being based on a bank balance they assumed was empty. Just wait, I thought, the first spark of genuine defiance igniting in my chest. Just wait. The kitchen was a temporary sanctuary, buzzing with the activity of the catering staff Uncle Gary had hired. That was his style, flashy expenditure to prove a point, even if he complained about the cost for the next 6 months. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap, avoiding the wine. I needed a clear head. I stood by the granite island, watching the steam rise from a pot of potatoes. I let my mind drift away from the stifling house to my office. Nexus Innovations. My baby, my empire. It had started in a garage, yes, the very garage Gary loved to make jokes about. But in 7 years, it had grown from me and a laptop to a team of 200 of the brightest minds in tech consultancy. We were the silent architects behind the digital transformations of Fortune 500 companies. I wasn't just paying the bills. I had just closed a deal last week that was worth more than Uncle Gary's entire accumulated lifetime earnings. But here, in this kitchen, I was nobody. Sarah breezed in, checking her phone. "Liam is 10 minutes out. God, I hope the turkey isn't dry. He's used to such high standards, you know? His company caters lunch every day from 5-star restaurants." "Sounds nice," I said, leaning against the counter. Sarah stopped and looked at me, really looked at me with that same pitiful expression. "Look, Alina, I know Gary is Gary, but he means well. He's just worried. We all are." "Worried about what?" "Your future," she sighed, putting her phone down. "You're 34, you're driving a rust bucket, you're still consulting on little projects. Liam said his company is actually hiring entry-level support staff. I could ask him to put in a word. It's steady money, Alina, benefits, dental." The offer was wrapped in kindness, but the center was pure poison. She wanted me to be an admin assistant. She wanted to save me. "I appreciate it, Sarah," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "But I'm happy where I am, really." She rolled her eyes, grabbing a bottle of expensive Chardonnay. "Pride doesn't pay for retirement, Alina. Just think about it. Don't be stupid." She walked out, leaving the insult hanging in the air like stale smoke. Don't be stupid. I followed her back out to the dining room as everyone was taking their seats. The table was lavishly set, crystal, silver, fine china. There was a strict seating chart. Gary was at the head, of course. Sarah was to his right. The empty chair for the mysterious Liam was next to her. I scanned for my name card. I found it at the very end of the table, next to the swinging kitchen door, squeezed between a Fern and Aunt Debbie. It was the kids' spot, essentially. The spot for the afterthought. "Sit, sit," Gary commanded, clapping his hands. "Let's get this show on the road. Liam can catch up. Time is money, right? Well, for some of us." I took my seat. The appetizers were passed around. Shrimp cocktail, stuffed mushrooms. "So," Gary bellowed, pointing a fork at me, Elena, Sarah tells me you're still doing what is it, computer fixing? Tech consultancy, Gary, I corrected gently. Optimization strategies for enterprise software. Right, he waved his hand dismissively. Fixing computers. Listen, I was talking to a buddy of mine, owns a dealership out on Route 9. He needs someone to manage his Facebook page, post pictures of trucks, that sort of thing. I told him my niece is a whiz with the internet, pays $15 an hour. Cash. The table went silent. He was offering me a teenage internship. I'm not looking for new clients' rack of plastic Tupperware containers. They were old, stained with tomato sauce from previous meals. Status as the provider. I looked at the stained plastic containers. Then I looked at Gary. Thank you, Gary, I said, a small, tight smile playing on my lips. I'll keep that in mind. That's the spirit, he roared, satisfied. She'll probably ask for leftovers before the turkey is even carved. Am I right? I laughed. I actually laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. But inside, my mind was racing. They have no idea. They had forgotten one crucial thing about me. I wasn't just a tech consultant. Object baiting the trap. What does he do that's so important? Sarah lit up, relieved to move past the awkwardness. Oh, he's in software too, actually, but at a real company, a major firm. He just got promoted to senior lead developer. He's managing a huge team. He says the CEO is in an apartment, eating toast because I couldn't afford cheese. I had been fired from a mid-level IT job for insubordination over the table, whispering loudly to Aunt Debbie. Now listen, Liam is making 6 figures. He's a sharp kid. Don't embarrass me. And keep Elena, contained. I don't want him thinking we're running a shelter here. He looked at me, his eyes cold and hard. Elena, try not to talk about your business tonight, okay? Liam deals with high-level enterprise architecture. He doesn't need to hear about you fixing printers or whatever it is you do. Let the adults talk shop. I understand, Gary, I said softly. I'll be quiet as a mouse. The voices in the hall, Gary grilled, standing up to greet the guest. Then they walked in. Liam was tall, sharp-looking, dressed in a suit that cost a decent amount, though the fit was slightly off the rack. He had the eager, nervous energy of a young man trying desperately to impress his girlfriend's intimidating family. He was holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a bouquet of interest. Is our niece, Elena? She's doing her best. Liam turned to be polite, his smile fixed in place, ready to greet the poor relation. He looked at me. I looked at him. I recognized him instantly. Liam Hastings. We had hired him 4 months ago. He was a promising developer from a rival firm. I had signed his offer ago. I was the one on the screen, delivering the keynote about our Q4 strategy. He was the one watching. Liam's smile faltered. It didn't just fade, it disintegrated, as if trying to clear a hallucination. Liam stammered, his confident corporate persona vanished. Grab a seat, son, Gary said, oblivious to the panic attack happening in front of him. It probably looked like Liam was just overwhelmed by the magnificence of the household, or perhaps intimidated by Gary's boisterous welcome. But I saw the truth. I saw the way Liam's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, his eyes locked on me with the terrified recognition of a man who realizes he has just walked into a lion's den, only to find his boss is the lion. Well, don't just stand there, son. Gary's voice shattered the tension like a dropped plate. Sit right there next to Sarah. You need a drink, you look pale. Tough week at the office. Liam moved like a marionette with tangled strings. He jerked his gaze away from me and stumbled toward his chair, nearly knocking over a crystal water goblet as he sat down. Yes, Liam managed to choke out. His voice was an octave higher than it had been a moment ago. Very, very tough week. I bet, Gary chuckled, pouring a generous amount of red wine into Liam's glass, spilling a few drops on the white tablecloth without noticing. High stakes in the software game, right? I know the drill. Kill or be killed. That's why I like you, Liam. You're a shark, not like He gestured vaguely with the wine bottle toward my end of the table, not even bothering to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. Not like Alina. I watched Liam. He was gripping the stem of his wine glass so hard I thought it might snap. He looked at Gary, then he looked at me, his eyes pleading for instruction. He was in an impossible position. He was sitting at a dinner table where his girlfriend's uncle was actively mocking the woman who held his career in her hands. I needed to secure the perimeter. If Liam blurted out, "Wait, that's the CEO of Nexus," right now, Gary would just laugh it off or accuse me of lying. It would be messy. I needed total control. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I kept it below the table's edge, resting it on my lap. I knew the company directory was synced T. Oh, my personal device, a perk of being the founder. I navigated to the employee roster, typed in Hastings, and found him immediately. Liam Hastings, Senior Lead Developer, Mobile Division, hired August 2024. I tapped the message icon. Across the table, Gary was launching into a monologue about his own importance. "You know, Liam, managing people is an art. You can't be friends with them, you have to be a god to them. That's my philosophy. Fear motivates better than kindness. Take my team." My thumbs flew across the screen. Isn't. A second later, a soft buzz vibrated against the mahogany table. It came from Liam's jacket pocket. Liam jumped as if he'd been electrocuted. "Popular guy," Sarah teased, placing a hand on his arm. "Probably work, right? They can't survive without you." I should check," Liam stammered. He pulled his phone out with trembling fingers. I took a slow sip of water, watching him over the rim of the glass. He unlocked the screen. I saw his eyes widen. He read the text, then his head snapped up to look at me. I held his gaze, my expression completely neutral, stone cold. The text read, "I am enjoying the dinner, Liam. Do not interrupt my uncle. Do not reveal my identity yet. Just play along. I want to hear what he has to say." Liam swallowed again. He looked back at his phone, then slipped it into his pocket. He took a massive gulp of wine, draining half the glass in one go. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, frowning slightly. "Yes," Liam said, his voice sounding strangled. "Just a system update. Nothing I need to handle right now." "Good man," Gary said, slamming his hand on the table. "Never let the underlings dictate your schedule. So tell me about this company of yours. Nexus Innovations, right? Sarah says it's a rocket ship." "It is," Liam said, his eyes darting to me again. "It's incredible." "And the boss?" Gary asked, leaning in, his face greasy with anticipation. "Sarah says the CEO is a mystery, probably some Silicon Valley hotshot, right? Ruthless, a real hardass." This was the test. I waited. Liam looked at Gary, then at me. He was sweating now, beads of perspiration forming on his forehead, despite the cool air in the room. Liam started, then corrected himself quickly. "The CEO is very effective, focused, values, integrity above all else." "Integrity?" Gary scoffed, spitting a little bit of breadcrumb as he laughed. "Integrity is a word losers use to explain why they aren't rich. You think the guy at the top got there by being nice? No way. He stepped on necks, Liam. Necks." "Actually," Liam said, his voice shaking but growing a little firmer as he looked at me for approval. "The CEO started the company from a garage, built it from nothing, just pure skill." "Garage?" Gary snorted, rolling his eyes at me. "Hear that, Alina? A garage, that's how you do it. You don't stay in the garage for 5 years tinkering with junk. You launch, you execute. You clearly missed the execute part." I smiled. "I guess I did, Gary. I'm just a slow learner." Liam looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die. The tension was ratcheting up, tightening around his throat. He knew the truth. He knew that the junk Gary was mocking was the very software architecture he spent 40 hours a week building. "So," I said, leaning forward slightly, deciding to pull the string a little tighter. "Liam, since you're high up in the company, does your CEO pay well, or does she expect you to work for experience? I emphasized the she, causing Gary to frown. She, Gary asked. The CEO is a woman. Yes, Liam said quickly. And she pays very well, extremely well. The benefits are generous. She takes care of her people. A woman, Gary muttered, looking at his martini glass with disdain. Well, that explains the integrity bit. Probably soft. Probably lets people cry in the break room. That company won't last 5 years. Mark my words. You cash out your stock options as soon as you can, son. Get out before she drives it into the ground. Liam looked at me horrified. He was waiting for me to explode. He was waiting for the tyrant to emerge. But I just picked up a carrot stick and crunched it loudly. Interesting advice, Gary, I said. I'll make a note of that. The turkey was dry. It was sawdust dry, the kind of dry that requires a gulp of water with every bite just to facilitate swallowing. But Gary sat at the head of the table, carving it like he was a surgeon performing a life-saving operation, piling mounds of the desiccated meat onto everyone's plates. Eat up, Alina, Gary commanded, dropping a particularly large, bone-dry chunk onto my plate. Protein, brain food, maybe it'll help you figure out a business plan. Sarah giggled. Dad, stop, you're terrible. But she didn't tell him to stop, she enjoyed it. It was their ritual, bonding over the family failure. Liam had barely touched his food. He was pushing peas round his plate with his fork, his eyes constantly flicking toward me. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb to detonate. So, Gary said, chewing with his mouth open, speaking of finances, we need to talk about Grandma. The room went quiet. This was the annual shakedown. My grandmother was in an assisted living facility, a very nice one, with a garden and 24-hour nursing care. It was expensive. The rates are going up again in January, Gary announced, looking solemn. Inflation, it's killing us, but you know me, I promised Mom I'd take care of her. I've been shouldering the burden. $5,000 a month, that's what it takes. He looked around the table, expanding his chest. I don't ask for thanks. That's what the head of the family does, but it means sacrifices. No new boat this year. Debbie and I are tightening the belt. You're a saint, Gary, Aunt Debbie murmured, looking at him with adoration. We appreciate it, Dad, Sarah added. Really, Grandma is so lucky to have you. Then Gary turned his gaze to me. It was a predatory look. Now, Alina, he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he loved. I know you can't contribute. I'm not asking you to. You can barely keep gas in that wreck of a car, but maybe you could go visit her more, since you have so much free time. I set my fork down. The metal clinked against the china, a sharp sound in the quiet room. I knew for a fact Gary wasn't paying $5,000 a month. I knew this because I was paying the bill. 3 years ago, the facility had called Gary to say his check had bounced. He had screamed at them and threatened to move Grandma to a state-run home. The administrator had called me as the secondary contact. I had given them my corporate credit card and set up an auto-pay for the full amount, including the private room upgrade. I had explicitly told the administrator to keep it anonymous, to let Gary think his partial payments or whatever he was doing were covering it, just to keep the peace. But now, hearing him lie to Liam, hearing him use his generosity as a weapon to bludgeon me, something snapped. 5,000? I asked, my voice deceptively calm. That sounds high, Gary. Are you sure that's the figure? Gary's face reddened. Excuse me, are you questioning my math? I write the check, Alina. I think I know what it costs. I just mean, I continued, leaning back in my chair, that seems like a lot for the base rate. Unless she's getting extra services, or maybe you're including administrative fees for yourself. How dare you? Aunt Debbie gasped. Alina, Sarah snapped. Shut up, you don't pay a dime, you don't get to have an opinion. I'm just curious, I said, looking directly at Gary. Liam, you're good with numbers. Does 5,000 sound right for a facility like Oak Creek? Liam froze. He looked at Gary, who was glaring at him, daring him to side with the enemy. Then he looked at me. He saw the glint in my eye. He realized I wasn't asking for an opinion, I was giving an order to scrutinize. Well, Liam started, his voice shaky. My grandmother was in a place like that. Usually the billing is complex. Transparency is important. Transparency, Gary shouted. I am the definition of transparency. I put food on this table. I pay for this house. I pay for my mother's care. And I have to sit here and be interrogated by the niece who, let's be honest, came here for a free meal. He stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. You're ungrateful, Alina. That's your problem. You've always been ungrateful. You think the world owes you a living because you're creative. Well, newsflash, the world doesn't care. Money talks, and you have nothing to say. He sat back down, red-faced and breathing heavily. Now, he growled, pass the potatoes. I didn't reach for the potatoes. I reached for my phone again. You're right, Gary, I said softly. Money does talk, it speaks very clearly. I tapped the screen. I wasn't checking a directory this time. I was logging into my banking app. Liam, I said, do you have your phone handy? Yes, Liam whispered. Check your email, I said. I just forwarded you a PDF. I'd love your professional opinion on the formatting. It's a billing statement. Gary frowned. What are you doing? Get off your phones. Liam pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. His eyes widened to the size of saucers. He looked at the document, then he looked at me, then at Gary. What is it? Sarah asked, sensing the shift in the air. Liam. Liam looked up, his face pale. It's a receipt from Oak Creek Assisted Living. So, Gary barked, I told you I pay the bills. No, Liam said, his voice trembling but gaining volume. This receipt, it's dated for the last 36 months, paid in full. Exactly, Gary said triumphantly. Paid in full, Liam continued, looking directly at Gary, by the Nexus Trust. Electronic wire transfer. Sen. Dare, E. Vance. The room went silent, dead silent. E. Vance, Alina Vance. Gary blinked. What? That's impossible. I send them checks. I send them checks every month. Do you? I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a razor. Or do you send them $500 for incidentals and pocket the rest of the money Grandma's estate left behind? The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The color drained from Gary's face, leaving it a blotchy, grayish white. Aunt Debbie looked between us, confusion warring with denial in her eyes. That's a lie, Gary sputtered. That's a fake document. You photoshopped that. She's trying to frame me, Debbie. She's jealous. It's not a fake, Gary, Liam said quietly. He was staring at the PDF on his phone, scrolling down. He had shifted. He was no longer the terrified boyfriend. He was the senior lead developer realizing the data in front of him was irrefutable, and perhaps realizing that defending his CEO was the only way to survive the night. This is a verified bank statement. It has the digital signature of the institution. It's authentic. You shut up, Gary screamed, turning on Liam. You're in on it, you too, conspiring against me in my own house. Why would I conspire with her? Liam asked, genuinely baffled by Gary's logic. I just met her, or I thought I did. Gary, I said, my voice steady, rising above his shouting. I have paid Oak Creek $6,450 a month for the last 3 years, plus the extra for her physical therapy. I did it because I wanted Grandma to be safe. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd stop paying your share if you knew I had it covered. My share, Gary laughed, a manic, desperate sound. I pay everything. We can call them, I suggested, right now on speaker. Gary froze, he knew. He knew that if I made that call, the facade would crumble instantly. You wouldn't dare, he hissed, you ungrateful little. I'm investigating, Gary, I said, using the term he had mocked earlier. I'm optimizing the family finances, and I'm finding a lot of redundancy. Sarah stood up, her face flushed. Alina, stop it. You're ruining Thanksgiving. Dad works hard. Why are you attacking him? You're just jealous because Liam is successful and you. She turned to Liam. Tell her, Liam. Tell her to stop making things up. Put her in her place. This was the moment, the pivot point. Liam looked at Sarah, his girlfriend, who was demanding he destroy the woman who signed his paychecks. Then he looked at Gary, the bully who had been putting on a show all night. Then he looked at me. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Liam stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. Sarah, Liam said, his voice surprisingly firm. I can't tell her to stop, because she's not making it up. What are you talking about? Sarah cried. The document is real, Liam said, and, frankly, Gary's behavior tonight has been enlightening. Enlightening? Gary sneered. Who do you think you are? You're a coder, you're a nobody. I could buy and sell you. Actually, Liam said, and a small, nervous smile touched his lips as he looked at me. You couldn't, and you certainly couldn't buy and sell her. Her, Gary pointed a trembling finger at me. She's a broke artist. She's driving a 10-year-old Honda. She's begging for leftovers. I stood up then. I didn't rush. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my sweater. I drove the Honda because I didn't want to make you feel bad, Gary, I said. I didn't want to rub it in your face. I wanted to have a nice family dinner. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the valet key, the one with the Porsche crest on it. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy clatter next to the gravy boat. But you're right about one thing, I said. I don't need the leftovers. What is that? Aunt Debbie whispered, staring at the key. That, Liam said, stepping back from the table as if to distance himself from the blast radius, is the key to a Panamera Turbo S. I've seen it in the executive parking lot. Spot number 1. Executive parking lot? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Liam, what are you saying? Liam took a deep breath. Sarah, Alina isn't a computer fixer. She's the founder of Nexus Innovations. She's my boss. She's the CEO. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. All the air had been sucked out of the room. Gary's mouth opened and closed, like a fish on a dock. He looked at me, then at the key, then at Liam. CEO, Gary whispered. Nexus. 200 employees, I said calmly. 3 offices, global contracts. And yes, Gary, integrity is actually very profitable. I picked up the stack of dirty Tupperware containers Gary had slid toward me earlier. I held them up. I think you might need these more than I do, I said, especially if the IRS deck. I'ds to audit where Grandma's money actually went. Gary's face went from red to purple. The veins in his neck bulged. He had been stripped naked in his own castle. His narrative, the rich uncle, the provider, the hero, was dead. Get out, Gary rasped. Get out of my house. I'm leaving, I said, but I'm taking the truth with me. And Liam. Liam snapped to attention. Yes, Ms. Vance. You can stay if you want, I said, but I have a feeling the conversation is about to get very unpleasant. Liam looked at Sarah. She was staring at me with a look of pure horror and calculation, her mind trying to reconfigure everything she thought she knew. Liam started. Actually, I interrupted, looking at the Tupperware in my hand. I almost forgot the best part. I dropped the plastic containers back onto the table. I bought the nursing home, Gary. The statement hung in the air, an absolute zero that froze everything in the room. I bought the nursing home. Gary stared at me, his eyes bulging from his head, a vein throbbing alarmingly in his temple. He tried to speak, but only a strangled, sputtering sound came out. It was Aunt Debbie who broke the silence. The wine glass she had been clutching, the one she had used to self-medicate through decades of Gary's bullying, slipped from her numb fingers. It hit the edge of the mahogany table, shattering into diamond-bright shards. Red wine exploded outwards, staining the expensive white linen tablecloth like a fresh wound. The crash seemed to snap Gary back to reality. You're a liar, he screamed, slamming his fists onto the table, making the silverware jump. You're sick in the head, Alina. You always have been. You live in a fantasy world in that little garage of yours. You bought the nursing home. With what? Monopoly money. He turned frantically to the others, desperate to regain control of the narrative. Do you hear her? She's having a breakdown. Sarah, call the police. She's delusional and dangerous. Sarah didn't move. She was staring at the red stains spreading across the tablecloth, her face pale. It's not a delusion, Gary, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. I enjoyed this part. I enjoyed laying out the architecture of his demise. It was a distressed asset acquisition. Oak Creek's parent company was over-leveraged. My firm was looking to diversify our real estate holdings. During due diligence, I saw the accounts receivable list. Your name was at the very top of the delinquent column, Gary. 90 days past due on the incidentals. Every single month. That's administrative error, Gary yelled, sweat pouring down his face. They always mess up the billing. I told you I pay. No, Gary, I said, leaning forward slightly. You don't. You cash Grandma's pension checks, you keep the money, and you let me pay the actual bills anonymously. You've been running a Ponzi scheme with your own mother's care. I looked at Liam, who was still standing, looking like he wanted to teleport to another planet. Liam, I said, you're a data guy. What do you call it when someone misrepresents financial inputs to cover up a deficit? Liam swallowed hard. He looked at Gary, then at me. He straightened his spine. Fraud, Ms. Vance, Liam said clearly. That's called fraud. Fraud, Gary bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at Liam. You traitor, I welcomed you into my home, I gave you advice. Your advice, Liam said, his voice gaining strength, was to step on necks. You told me to cash out before my female CEO drove the company into the ground. You told me integrity was for losers. Liam stepped away from the table, moving physically closer to where I was standing. It was a clear realignment of loyalty. I'd rather work for someone who buys a building to protect her grandmother than someone who steals from his own mother to lease a Mercedes he can't afford, Liam spat out. Gary looked like he'd been slapped. He turned to his daughter, his last hope. Sarah, he pleaded, tell them about the business. Tell them how well we're doing. Sarah slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She looked at her father, really looked at him, for the first time in years without the filter of adoration. Dad, she whispered, you told me the boat was on backorder. You told me my trust fund was just illiquid right now because of market fluctuations. Gary blanched. It is. The market is volatile, sweetie, you know that. Is the market volatile, Gary? I asked, pulling up another document on my phone. Or did you liquidate Sarah's trust 6 months ago to cover margin calls on your day trading losses? Sarah let out a strangled gasp. She looked at me horrified, and I just turned the phone screen toward her. The evidence was there in black and white. Oh my God, Sarah breathed. You spent it. You spent my down payment for a house. It was an investment, Sarah, Gary pleaded, sweating profusely. I was going to double. I just need a little more time. Alina is twisting everything. Sarah stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. She looked at the man she had idolized, the man she had modeled her entire worldview after, and she saw nothing but a hollow, panicked con artist. You're disgusting, Sarah hissed. You sat there mocking Alina for being poor, and you were stealing from me and Grandma the whole time. Sarah, wait, Gary cried, reaching for her arm. She recoiled as if he were venomous. Don't touch me. Gary stood alone at the head of his ruined feast. His wife was sobbing silently over broken glass. His daughter despised him. The guest he tried to impress was actively testifying against him, and the niece he had bullied for a decade on the roof over his mother's head. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You planned this, he snarled. You came here tonight just to do this, you venomous little bitch. I picked up my purse. I came here for turkey, Gary. You're the one who served up the truth. I just made sure everyone ate it. The walk to the front door felt like a victory lap, though I took no pleasure in the wreckage I left behind. It was a necessary demolition. Gary was shouting incoherently behind us, threats of lawsuits and disownment bouncing harmlessly off my back. I opened the heavy front door, and the cold night air hit my face. It felt incredibly clean. Liam was right behind me. He practically sprinted out of the house, desperate to escape the blast zone. He stopped on the front walkway, shivering slightly in his suit jacket, looking terrified as I turned to face him. "Ms. Vance," he started, his voice shaking. "Elena, oh God, I am so sorry. Everything he said in there, I didn't agree with it. I was just being polite, I swear. I had no idea he was like that. I had no idea you were." He gestured helplessly toward my Honda, then toward the darkness where my real life existed. "Liam," I said, stopping him with a raised hand. I kept my voice professional, the CEO voice. "Breathe." He sucked in a gulp of air. "What happened tonight," I said, "was a personal family matter. It has absolutely no bearing on your employment at Nexus. Do you understand?" Relief washed over his face so intensely his knees almost buckled. Yes, absolutely, thank you." "However," I continued, my tone sharpening slightly, "I did hear Gary's advice to you, about stepping on necks, about integrity being for losers." Liam winced. I was just nodding along. He's Sarah's dad, I was trying to make a good impression." "I know," I said. "But Liam, at Nexus, integrity isn't a buzzword. It's our operating system. If I ever get a whiff that you're adopting Gary's management philosophy, or if you ever judge a colleague by the car they drive instead of the code they write, we will have a very different conversation. Are we clear?" Liam straightened up, meeting my eyes with genuine seriousness. "Crystal clear, Ms. Vance. It won't happen, ever." "Good," I said. "See you on Monday. Don't be late for the stand-up." I turned and walked to my Honda. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. 2 months later, in late January, the snow was falling heavily outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 42nd floor. The city looked peaceful from up here, a grid of lights covered in white. My assistant, Chloe, knocked softly on the glass door before entering. "Elena, your lunch is here. And you have a personal email that got flagged by the filter, but I think you might want to see it. It's from a Sarah Vance." I paused in the middle of reviewing the Q1 projections. "Thanks, Chloe. Leave it on the desk." She set down a sleek glass container filled with a gourmet quinoa and grilled salmon salad, my actual leftovers from a business dinner the night before at a Michelin-star restaurant. I smiled faintly at the contrast to Gary's greasy Tupperware. I opened the email on my secure laptop. Subject: Grandma and Things. "Elena, I don't really know how to start this. Sorry, doesn't seem like enough. I was awful to you. For years, I bought into Dad's whole worldview because it was easier than seeing the truth. I'm ashamed of who I was at that dinner table. Liam and I broke up. I couldn't look at him without thinking of that night. I'm staying with a friend in the city now. I got a job as a junior marketing coordinator. It pays almost nothing, and my boss is a tyrant, but it's real. It's mine. I visited Grandma yesterday at Oak Creek. The staff said you had the heating system upgraded in her wing. Her room was toasty. She seemed happy. Thank you for that. Dad used to complain about how cold it was there, but he never did anything about it. I guess that sums everything up. You don't have to reply. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I hope someday I can be half the woman you are. Sarah." I read the email twice. It wasn't a mag. Ike fix. Years of conditioned behavior wouldn't vanish overnight, but it was a crack in the facade. It was a start. I moved the email to a folder labeled Family. I didn't reply yet. She needed time to hustle, to feel the burn of earning her own way. It would be good for her. As for Gary, the fallout was swift and brutal. The IRS audit I had subtly hinted at became a very real reality once I filed the necessary tax documents for the nursing home acquisition, triggering discrepancies in his filings. The last I heard, the suburban house was under contract for a quick sale to cover back taxes and the money he owed Sarah's trust. Aunt Debbie had moved in with her sister. Gary was reportedly sleeping on a friend's couch, working part-time managing the social media page for that used car dealership on Route 9. $15 an hour. Cash. I closed my laptop and swiveled my chair to face the window. I took a bite of the salmon. It was delicious. I thought about the years I spent feeling small, feeling less than, because I measured myself with their broken yardstick. I thought about the cold garage, the ramen noodles, the fear of failure. And then I looked out at the city, at the thousands of lights glowing in the dark, many of them powered by systems my company had built. I wasn't the poor relation anymore. I wasn't the cautionary tale. I was the architect of my own life. And finally, for the first time in a long time, I was full.